Okay. Helo a chroeso. Welcome I gynhadledd gorffennol digidol Comisiwn Brenhinol Henebion Cymru. Dyma'r gweithdy cyntaf o'r wythnos, lle fydd y ffocws ar achub hanesyddol ar y cyd. Mae wedi drefnu gan Photoconsortium. Yn arwain y gweithdy heddi fydd Antonella Fresa o Promoter SRL, cydlynydd technegol a rheolwr cysylltiadau prosiectau Ewropeaidd a chenedlaethol ym meysydd treftadaeth digidol diwylliannol, creadigedd a chreu ar y cyd, gwyddoniaeth dinesydd, dinasoedd call, cadwraeth digidol ac e-istadeilydd. Nawr, sylwch fod yna rhinwedd chat i gael sydd yn gyhoeddus ac yn caniatáu I ddirprwyon cyfathrebu rhwng eich gilydd, ond mae hefyd blwch Q&A sydd yn caniatáu I chi yn y gynulleidfa I ofyn cwestiynau i'r panelwyr ar gyfer y sesiwn holi ag ateb ar y diwedd. Welcome to you all to the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales's Digital Past Conference. This is the first workshop of our week-long event and is titled today, Saving Collective Visual History. And it's been organised by Photoconsortium. Leading the workshop today will be Antonella Fresa of Promoter SRL, Technical Coordinator and Communication Manager of national and European projects in the domains of digital cultural heritage, creativity and co-creation, citizen science, smart cities, digital preservation, and e-infrastructures. Now, please note there is a chat function available, but this is public and it allows delegates to message between themselves. But also there's a Q&A box, and this allows you in the audience to submit questions to the panelists for discussion afterwards. Okay, so now I will hand over to Antonella, who will run the session. So, croeso, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting us to the Digital Past 2021. We thank you in particular the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales for the invitation. We are very proud to be with you, and we would like also to express our thankfulness to the European Union and to Europeana, because this workshop is organized by Photoconsortium in the frame of the Europeana initiative. Photoconsortium is one of the accredited aggregators of Europeana, contributes with the photographic heritage to the huge European initiative on accessibility to European cultural heritage. And in the frame of this initiative, we run a series of what we call the capacity building initiatives, sorry, but always speaking and moving with the mouse is problematic, at least for my age. So it is a question of capacity building in the digital transformation, capacity building in accessibility to cultural heritage. And in particular, today we would like to talk about capacity building in preservation of fragile cultural heritage. The fragile cultural heritage we wanted to address is the cultural heritage of the negatives of photographic negatives that are the source of a piece of information that regards our society and that risk to be disappearing if we do not preserve them on time and with the correct techniques. We will have three interventions from three major archives from Europe that participate in Photoconsortium Association, and a concluding intervention from a professor of KU Leuven of the university in Leuven, that will tell us what to do after we have preserved and made accessible the contents online from these fragile photographic negatives. The first intervention is from John Balean of TopFoto. He will talk about fading photographs with fading memories. A second intervention will follow from Erik Buelinckx from the Royal Cultural Heritage Research Institution in Belgium. Again, about a fragile road for negatives that are in dusty houses. And the third intervention will be from David Iglésias Franch from the municipality of Girona and the digital archive at the municipality, that he will tell us when we have digitized what happened next, and eventually an intervention from Professor Fred Truyen on user engagement and audience development as part of an integral digital strategy. So I'm happy to give the floor to the first speaker, John Ballen. The title of his speech is Fading Photographs with Fading. Just a chance to save visual narrative and engage the generation who lived and created it. John is operations and project manager at TopFoto. TopFoto is, I guess you know, a picture library that contains over 5 million image objects. John has coordinated and participated in a number of European projects and has a specific interest related to press photographic history. He is on board of BAPLA, CEPIC, chairman of Pixel, and he participates in the steering committee of the Photoconsortium. John, the floor is yours. Just as technical information, we invite our guests to put your questions in the Q&A session. And Valentina, our colleague, will monitor the Q&A session, but for larger discussion, we wait for the end of the presentations for a better dialogue. Thank you, John. The floor is yours.
Okay, just going to pick up where we left off. Thanks, everybody. I'll stick my spectacles on. I'm going to start, if I may, with an extract from Henry Mayhew's book, London Labour and the London Poor. It was originally published in weekly numbers between 1850 and 1852 for 2p. I found the lad who first gave me an insight into the proceedings of the Associated Crossing Sweepers crouched on the stone steps of a door in Adelaide Street, Strand, and when I spoke to him, he was preparing to settle down in a corner and go to sleep. His legs and body curved round almost as closely as those of a cat on a hearth. The moment he heard my voice, he was upon his feet asking me to give halfpenny to poor little Jack. I was 15 on 24th of May, sir, and I've been sweeping crossings now near upon 2 years. There's a party of 6 of us, and we have crossings from St. Martin's Church as far as Pall Mall. I always go along with them as they lodges in the same place I do. In the daytime, if it's dry, we do anything what we can, open cabs or anything. But if it's wet, we separate and I and another gets a crossing. Those who gets it first keeps it. And we stand on each side and take our chance. We do it in this way. If I was to see 2 gentlemen coming, I should cry out, 2 toffs, and then they're mine. And my mate is bound not to follow them, for if he did, he'd get a hiding from the whole lot of us, etc., etc. It's a fascinating historical narrative, don't you think? We have the author's view, a direct quote from the young crossing sweeper, which is an extinct occupation which falls in the realm of intangible heritage. Watch out for the EU Project Weave coming this April. And a visual illustration engraved from a daguerreotype created and credited to a professional photographer called Beard, Richard Beard to be precise, one of only 51 professional photographers in Great Britain as listed by the 1851 census. Henry Mayhew's works not only interest us today, but they also inspired his contemporaries, most notably, and probably no surprise from the small extract that I was just reading, Charles Dickens. And where does the whole package fail? Yes, I am speaking for all the photo historians. Although it was impossible to print photographs until the turn of the 20th century, the original photographic images, predating Roger Fenton's Crimea, and therefore some of, if not the first photojournalism, has been lost forever. Heartbreaking. And of course, we in the 21st century value heritage so much that this cannot happen again. False. I'm not talking about the images of 170 years ago, or even 100 years ago. Our collective visual history from 70 to 50 years ago is disappearing. Millions of original negatives and transparencies are under critical threat from vinegar syndrome, nitrate decay, color shifts, amongst the many causes which are leaving them crumbling or fading before our very eyes. What is more, the generation which holds the personal narratives for these images is also disappearing. The creators, the subjects, the reflection of life at the time. Hear me now make an impassioned appeal to save our collective visual history. If you have deep pockets, if you work for an organization with some resources, if you know someone who has or works for an organization of above, then please note photography archives need funding for mass digitization to save the image in order to engage and build the narratives from the oracles of living history. Although I embrace all photographic collections, I make special effort to highlight archives in private or corporate hands where there is no public mission or return on investment to undertake the scale of digitization that is needed, and where retaining licensing rights on their collections could be essential for sustainability, which leaves very little leeway on the national funding schemes. I give a very small example here, which were discovered at TopFoto during an EU project called Kaleidoscope Europe in the 1950s. It is fantastic that these images have been saved. Unlike earlier projects, however, what TopFoto was not allowed to do was to digitize any images using funding unless it allowed open access, i.e. including all commercial rights. Now, it is common stipulation when funding digitization now. As a picture library with a whole business and revenue for sustainability and conservation of the collections centered around intellectual property and licensing, it is completely prohibitive to essentially give copyright away. Generations of creators spent decades to protect their work from publishers who wrote with all copyright on the back of usage checks. Now, I don't want this workshop to be a debate about open access, and we do appreciate projects that allow us to even identify content, even if it means we ourselves have to 100% fund the digitization part to retain any rights. Most importantly, what I'm trying to highlight is that content and the partners that own it have become very secondary to projects that are happening now. And we need to redress that to understand exactly who are the owners of photographic archives and what specific measures are needed to encourage the digitization of their collection to save our collective visual history. So, how do we approach this? One, scale of the problem. We need to get together to discover how many images are at risk of extinction in the next 5 to 10 years. So if you have a collection under threat, please contact me or Photoconsortium. Tell us how many images, what is creating the risk, what are the dates the collection covers, and as much information as you can share. 2, funding. In the Europeana photography project, which ended 6 years ago now, our consortium, part funded by the European Commission, managed to digitize 450,000 high quality images with metadata in 3 years for approximately €5 per image. Such were the days of mass digitization funding. Can this be done more cost effectively today? Question mark. I know we can digitize more and more quickly. I pose the hanging question of who funds it, but I do need to throw out the saved for the nation, e.g. self-portrait by Sir Anthony van Dyck, 2014 value at deferral, £12.5 million, purchased by the National Portrait Gallery for £10 million. No disrespect to Van Dyck or the MPG, but one painting, £10 million saved for the nation. Wouldn't it be great to have that kind of headline for, say, 2 million photographs saved for the nation? 3, technical partners. Many collections have the capacity to digitize. They just don't have the resources to sustain non-stop full day at it. Others need help with all aspects, especially adding in complications of caption and metadata enhancement. Many collections might or should have a website, but in isolation, we found this is not good enough. Repositories such as Europeana are very good at collectivizing visual history. However, technology is racing ahead with huge resources and engagement benefits behind them. So we need to seize all of the opportunities that come our way. For narratives, this is where consortiums, partnerships, and engagement are critical for ensuring that it isn't just the picture that speaks 1,000 words. Context is so important to the perceptions of history. And just as every image is cropped to the photographer's eye, we, the future, need to know that there was a 360-degree view with all the senses involved when that image was taken. As mentioned, we have a limited time to digitize and disseminate to the generation who can provide the first-hand stories to record the visual narratives just like those 170 years ago in the work of Henry Mayhew. I appreciate your time listening to my appeal and evangelism about the importance of saving our collective visual history. And as a reminder, if you have a photographic collection at risk or you can help in any way to save these collections, please do get in touch. Thank you very much, and I'll hand you back to Antonella.
Thank you very much, John. Very inspiring, as usual. I think that you put questions on the table, some answers, many questions that needs to be answered. Certainly, open access versus copyright and business models for picture libraries. Preservation of...
I'm just slightly concerned that there's some that aren't, you know, there are valuable collections which are kind of being missed in any kind of way, and we're just going to lose them forever. So
yes, save a memory for everybody, for the nations, maybe, and the context and the narratives that are around the picture, because this will come also in the next speech. So thank you very much for your introduction. I pass the floor now to Erik, maybe for another technical speech. Erik is head of photo collection, library and digitization at the Royal Institute of Cultural Heritage in Brussels. He is responsible for photo collection, library, intervention files, archives, and digitization. His experience spans over the different levels which constitute the creation, maintenance, and conservation of the digital metadata and data about the cultural heritage. We have been partners in another important initiative supported by the European Union about digital preservation. So I guess that you will hear also about this matter, because preserving our memory is preserving the negatives, the physical representation of this past, the result of digitization, the context, and the stories that are associated with these contents. So it is a fragile road that moves from physical to digital, back and forth. Erik, the floor is yours.
Okay, I see that this works. Oops. Just a second. Okay, this you have seen. I can't put my face all the time on screen, so I'll immediately jump to the second slide. So let's talk a bit about our institution. So the Royal Institute of Cultural Heritage, also called KIK-IRPA for the Dutch and French name of it, holds a collection of about 1 million negatives of the Belgian cultural heritage. In this talk, we will sketch how we do this and the difficulties we encountered and still encounter on this fragile road. But that's not all the Institute does. Established in 1948, the Royal Institute for Cultural Heritage is one of 10 scientific institutions falling within the competence of the Federal Ministry of Scientific Policy. KIK-IRPA is committed to the inventory, the scientific study, the conservation, and the promotion of the country's artistic and cultural heritage. The Institute, whose chief mission is research and public service, represents a unique instrument for the heritage of our country, both movable and immovable, and immaterial, as we see with the photographic archive we have. So our 3 departments group art historians, photographers, chemists, physicists, and conservators, restorators. By comparing their observations, they gather reference material and study works of art from different points of view. Their composition, evolution, aging of materials, and also how to treat them. Any restoration treatment will be based on this detailed pre-study. So that's a bit what our institute does, but now we'll focus more on the photographic inventory of the Belgian cultural heritage, which was one of the main missions or the official missions of our institute. But the world changes, and of course also Belgium changed, and the political landscape in Belgium changed so much that this earlier official photographic inventory of the whole of Belgium is not really feasible anymore. The region, the communities, they do this themselves, but it doesn't stop us from still going around where we can, where we are asked to make photographs of works of art and other things available to the public or even private collections. And of course, we photograph every work of art that comes into our institute to be studied, restored, and also all the restorations that happen in situ, we photographically document. It's not only that, but over the years, we also collected photographs by famous or less famous documentary photographers, but then only in a way that we want these collections, either we bought them or received them, when they were accompanied by the negatives. And this is also a bit special, when this photographer gave the rights to the institute so that we can use them for future use. Now, a more small accent was made on the fact that we have color photography that started very late. And the reason therefore was that we didn't want to use color photography because the color negatives were too unstable. So, and since we have a photographic inventory, the idea was to have material that could last a bit longer. So it was only in the 90s that color photography started to be used in our institute. And then by the late 90s, of course, there was digital photography coming up, and now everything is done digitally. So a little bit more of just the history. It will just take a second. So we come from a museum as a kind of a department, and we developed in kind of an independent entity. So by the late 50s, the early 60s, we started to build our own specific building, an environment where small and large artworks could be studied and moved around in practical ways, from laboratories to restoration works up through photography and X-ray rooms. But we also, and this is the picture on the right, we also had in this building what we call the bunker. The bunker was constructed with a kind of acclimatization system to store our negatives. For many years, though, not enough attention was paid by the now retired responsible persons for this bunker. Paper, documents, furniture, all kinds of stuff was stored in that room. People went in and out without control. The machinery to monitor the climate was not regularly controlled, and so on and so on. So here's a picture of this bunker where on the left you see the old days and the right, the newer days, which is like current. But what's more important is that, in fact, since a couple of years, also not when I was responsible, but a little bit before, but now I'm responsible for it, we start again to say, oh, this is very important material we have here. So we again put in place all kinds of procedures, who could go in and out of the bunker. It was noted how many minutes you were inside. There were all kinds of all material that didn't belong in that place were moved out, and so on and so on. Okay, so I lost my, I'm not used to read. I lost my, now. Since a couple of years, this collection falls under my responsibilities. And what's happening these days is we're in the process of preparing a very big renovation of the bunker. But this will take years and lots of money. Years we probably have, I have young colleagues, but money we don't have. But the things advance slowly, and with a little luck, I'll see the new compartmented bunker, perfectly conditioned negatives before I retire in a couple of years. Why do we do that? And now I have to warn a bit the public, so you will see some very disturbing images, and the faint of heart may close their eyes now. Negatives degrade. Negatives degrade inherently for all kinds of reasons. If you have an environment that is not very good monitored, that has not the right temperature, not the right humidity, they degrade even more. And because they degrade, the only thing that we can do is try to stop that degradation, which is almost impossible, or at least to slow down the degradation. And that's why we indeed have this very big renovation work going on. So instead of having one bunker, one room where all the different negatives are stored, and we had created a kind of average environment, like which one was not the worst for all the different negatives, to keep things going on, this is not a good idea. So in the new building, we have different compartments so that the specific needs that certain negatives have that are different for other negatives, so that they can be stored in safe environments. Another special element was, of course, we have lots of nitrate negatives. And it was only in a couple of years ago that people showed a little video to our manager. It's a video you can easily find online, where you can see what happens when nitrate film, it was a real film, what happens to it when it explodes or when it takes fire. And these nitrate negatives, they take fire automatically at a certain temperature. We have more nitrate negatives in our bunker stored than safely is really acceptable. But anyway, showing this to my manager, they realized, okay, we have to do something very quickly about all this. And that's why I think this renovation will be done in a couple of years to make it a safe place for us for the future. So we put in place the monitoring and climate control systems. They will be updated through the renovation. But what I want to touch now quickly again is we have all these negatives. We have these negatives in good shape, and we have negatives in bad shape. Very surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the oldest negatives, glass negatives we have are in much better shape than some of the newer negatives. But there are 1 million of them all mixed together. And we are a very, very small team. So we have to prioritize. things that we can do. We can't just say, okay, this week we'll take all the negatives and put them again in new paper, in new boxes, acid-free and everything. We can't do that. So through the digitization, which is a program that the Belgian government sponsored, through the digitization, we managed also to say, okay, if we digitize, we also do a little conservation work on the negatives. But of course, to pick them, we have to prioritize, and it's about, we think we got some 3 priority groups. It's like the first part that we would like to do most quickly is the one that are in most degraded form. These are a lot, so we can't do it immediately. Secondly, of course, we also have to digitize and at the same time conserve these negatives, which offer the Institute some valorization possibilities. And through valorization possibilities, it's not only that we create our own website or that we have a conference of the founder of our institute. I use also the different European projects where I was involved with some of the partners here as a kind of a valorization element. So that when we have a new project like the one John talked about the 50s, or one we are now in about Chinese cultural heritage, these negatives are digitized too. And then the last priority for choosing which ones to digitize is, of course, when we have internal from colleagues or external commands of high resolution images to be used in publications. So the conservation before the digitization is a very, very light cleaning. We don't have restorers, strangely enough, we don't have restorers of photographic negatives in our institute. We have restorers for painting, for sculptures, for whatever you want, but not for negatives. So it is also a dream that one day we can have that one. After the conservation, we go to the digitization studio. It's always the same people. We have a very little team. And the way they work is that as much as possible, every person tries to do also the work the other persons do. And it's a combination of art historians, documentalists, and technicians. So that means that the art historians also take photographs of the negatives, do the cleaning, that the technicians try to help with searching metadata and so on and so on. So this is the way how we work. Of course, when everything is digitized, and Antonella mentioned it before too, that we were in a project partner because one of the problems of digital world is, like I show here for the analog world, is things can get bad. A digital object is not safe for the future, and there are two main reasons why they are not safe. First of which is you store them on a support, and the support is decaying. And secondly, you can have them stored in a format that in 5 years you can't read anymore. I think I still have somewhere on in my house some floppy disk with WordPerfect 5 files in it that will extremely difficult to read again. So in this project, Preforma, what we did is try to force a bit and create a tool that you use openly available standards to store your digital objects in. And for photography, for images, it was TIFF. It's an old format, but still for the moment, it's one of the safest to store. And if JPEG is developing something more open, then probably we go to JPEG, but then it can be easily done when, of course, you are sure that all the TIFF files you kept are still readable. When these TIFF files, when these images are done and digitized, of course, we have to put the metadata in our database system. This is here a screenshot of our database system. People type in the metadata, the photo is available, and the next day it can be seen on our website, like this one. Now, I just want to show something special for the website, because mainly our photographs are works of art, but we do have, like this one, some documentary photography. This is a photograph by the artist Henry Evenepoel by the end of the 19th century. Since we consider these negatives also very important objects, we describe also the negative for certain of them, and we put these negatives also, make these negatives also available for the public, digitally available for the public to see. And I will see that this link works, so that we can jump to the next. So people on our website can then scroll around to other researches, but I only want to show here that for the high resolution images, we have this possibility to zoom, and then you can, of course, go very far in all the different aspects that we have here. now I have to return the other one. Let's see if this works. Okay. So that's what we do. And I think to be really clear about it, I mentioned that, of course, it's the negatives. They are really fragile. But when I talk about a fragile road, it's mainly also about the decisions that you make, the procedures that you do, and all the other thing around on making available on this fragile road all the historical and interesting information, like John also talked about, that was created in the recent century. Thank you very much. George.
Thank you very much, Erik. I think that it was interesting to see how the private and the national level are approaching the problem. We will hear in the next presentation the local dimension. David will talk from a more local perspective that complements the 3 points of view. I found particularly interesting to reflect upon the fact that before digitization we have a conservation, but before conservation we have a content selection, because we cannot imagine to be able to preserve everything. So it is a path that from choosing what to preserve up to making it available and how online in the respect of the business of each organization. This is a long path that makes this fragile road even more challenging.
Yeah,
Yes, Erik.
I just would like one thing, because it's the problem when I thought about that we have to prioritize. It's like, okay, we can choose this and we can choose that, because to be honest, we know we can't do everything. But with the team I've probably for 70 to 100 years before everything is digitized. So just to make people understand how complicated and difficult and hard the next years will be to keep on doing what we do, and try to find, as John said, trying to find more help to preserve everything, because the way it's going now, it's really bad.
Thank you. So now the floor passes to David Iglésias Franch from the municipality of Girona. He is head of the photographic and audiovisual documentation section. David is coordinator and professor of a postgraduate program about photographic archives and professor at the Master on Archives at the University Autonomous of Barcelona. He's also president of the group of experts on photograph and audiovisual records at the International Council on Archives. And last but not least, member of the steering committee of the Photoconsortium Association. So, thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, Antonella, and good afternoon, everybody. And where is my... Sorry. I have a problem with my presentation.
If you want, I can go ahead sharing my screen.
Oh, now?
Ah, no, here it is.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, I will talk about what we do after digitization, what's next, I said in the title. But before, I would like to say something about the originals, because digitization is something challenging, There are many different processes, many different morphologies of the originals.
David, sorry to
Yes?
stop you, but we don't see your screen, your
No?
slides on the screen. No. If you want, I can put it online, and you tell me next, and I go through them.
Okay, we can do it this way.
But you have to stop sharing.
Yes.
Okay. Here it is. Okay.
Okay, next one, please. Okay, sorry for this. As I said, I start with talking about the originals, because digitization is something challenging, because there are different morphologies, different carriers, different aesthetics that must be reproduced when digitizing. But there is something also very important, that is the cultural value of photography, because there was a social use of photography, and we need to understand photography in the different periods. For example, in this slide, you see an image of 1877 of our city, Girona, and that is from the first reportage in the city. That's the collodion period. And making a collodion need times and resources, so it was difficult to go outside and taking images. So we find the same image in a photomechanical reproduction in a newspaper 15 years later, and that means something. That explains how photography was at that time. In the next slide, we will see that photographic images, please, next, Antonella. Yes, photographic images you see on the bottom on the right. No, the one before, please. Okay, you see the image there, and this image is reproduced in engravings in a magazine. So even if the photo mechanics exist, they choose engravings, because people were used to see images in that way, with that aesthetic. So we need to understand that this is an evolution of the cultural vision. And before we arrived to digital, there were engravings, there was photography, and now we have the digital image. So that's something that to consider when we digitize our collection. Next, please. Okay, so first step when it's digitized is to be online in the catalog. So you see here the daguerreotype from our collection, and you can download it. It's public domain. You can use it for everything, and you have all the information there. But if you want to go one step further, next, please. You can be in Europeana. You will know Europeana, a bigger audience, and you have more possibilities to disseminate your collection. In the next slide, we'll see that Europeana use vocabularies and different technologies that helps to disseminate, to better dissemination of images. The next one, please. And if the platform is open, you can be, of course, in Google. So everyone can arrive, can use your images, your collection, because it's easy to search them. So I will talk now about what you do next. This is the logical thing to do, to be on the catalogs, on the platforms, in different platforms. And in the next slide, we see different projects that we are working in the last 10 years. First of all, it's about technology. We want to explain the technology of these periods, how the daguerreotype was made, or how modern color images, or photography, or chronophotography, or even digital image. So using 3D modeling technology, we create audiovisual to explain this. And now, next please, we are working in the experience of working with these technologies. For example, we use artificial intelligence to go inside a lab and to create a daguerreotype. So what we try to sell now is the experience of making a daguerreotype. However, as we are in COVID times, we cannot use these glasses, so you don't have the complete experience. And we have created something a bit different, is what you see in the slide, and it's what will be shown in the exhibition that it will be launched at the end of the month about the daguerreotype in Barcelona. But for next project in Europe, the WIVI project, we will try to finish this artificial intelligence experience with the daguerreotypes. Okay, next please. So if you are digitized, of course, you can try to engage people, and one way is having this platform like WIVI, that was created also in a European project, and people that they live these times of photography, and also other people, they participate. Next, please. But things don't happen only online, but you need also to be in contact with local people, and that's why we organize these collection days. And one of these collection days was about family photography, and it was organized during the Kaleidoscope project. And because of this workshop, we create a methodology and we publish it, and it's explained in an audiovisual that you can find online. Okay, next. Then other possibilities, as with image recognition, you can see on your right different categories of portraits, views. So automatically you can create these categories. But what's even more interesting is that you can use this technology for creating categories that you don't expect. For example, some artists in the country, they have experimented with these algorithms that were used for our collection to create works of art. For example, using hundreds, thousands of portraits to create, to invent a new portrait of someone that doesn't exist. So this opens new ways of creating from archival collection. The next slide, you will see how you will also work in rephotography. These are images of civil war in Spain, in our city, in that case in Girona, and we mix this with new images. So that's a very good way to explain that in these streets, in these squares, this happened, the bombs, the tragedy of the war. It's another way to explain this period. In the next slide, we see that we use also video games to create a photography museum, as we are not able to create a real one. Photography is always better if we can see the image in real life. However, we can create these resources, in that case using video technology, and we have our own museum, and you can move inside and you can see the images we selected for this resource. Also, next please, we are working now and it's already finished. We'll do the presentation this month with aerial photography. We have these images of the city in the 70s, 1970, and now from these images we are showing how the city evolved, the evolution of the urbanism. So we can compare using the original image of the 70s as the base for creating this resource. Then, next, please. Then we also experiment with apps. There are thousands of apps that you can use. So for example, once we decided to do a selection from our 3 million collection, and we use this presentation. That's something simple, but helps also to disseminate the collection. And the next one, there are the two last slides. What's really good is when others are using our collection. For example, Sophie Tas from Photoconsortium, one of the outstanding members, she created these galleries about bicycles using this song that you probably know, the 9 million bicycles, and she adapted it to Girona. Okay, it's 9 million bicycles in Girona. And you see these images with this music, so it's a good experience. And she did in her own initiative using our collection. And the last slide is also an experience of others using our images. Someone from Estonia, he took our metadata from Europeana himself, the images, and these images are now located in the cultural map. These are 1,000 images of one of our collections of the beginning of the 20th century. So that's a way to see that we are online with good metadata and with good images. Maybe someone else can use our collection also to disseminate, also to try to explain photography. So I finish with this. And I like to mention what John said, that from the digitized image, from the digital collection, we work building narratives and we work engaging audience. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, John. It's nice to see how from the preservation done by private archives and by national research centers. At the local level, it is possible to activate a series of applications that are looking for establishing a dialogue, a connection, a participation of citizens in our heritage. And this introduces very well the last intervention of today from Professor Fred Truyen. Fred is a president of Photoconsortium Association, professor at the Faculty of Arts at KU Leuven, where he is in charge of the Media Lab's Cultural Studies Digital. He publishes on digitization, photography, and e-learning. He is involved in many projects on open educational resources and on Europeana. His main research focus is the digital transformation roadmap for cultural heritage institutions. And Fred will talk to us about user engagement and audience development as a part of an integral digital strategy. Thank you, Fred. The floor is yours.
I will share my screen and so I guess you all are seeing my screen at this moment. So I will have to keep it short because at 4 I'm supposed to give a class here in Leuven to teach to the students. What I wanted to talk about is about quickly about the need for digitization strategies, and then give some ideas on how this needs to be viewed in a more encompassing way than we used to. So the status of digitization efforts, in particular in Europe, is not so good. There was a huge project in 2011 to encourage actions on digitization in all member states. But in 2015, we made a kind of estimate, And yeah, we hoped that we could digitize about 10% of the holdings of European holdings that since, of course, have still grown considerably. So there is a lot to do. And you see indeed that in Europeana, where there is a kind of stabilization on the number of objects that we have at about 60 million objects. And one of the problems, certainly for Europe, is that the representation of collections of the different countries and regions is very uneven. So you see that there is a disproportionate. Here we display the number of images per 100,000 citizens. And you see that it is still very skewed towards certain countries. Now, at the moment, Europeana is engaged in a lot of work on digital transformation and capacity building out of that. But the Commission orients its efforts mostly to innovation, capacity building, training, aggregation, but not so much to digitization. So there is a lot of work still to be done on digitization. Within the project Indices Culture, I'm involved in developing a kind of self-assessment tool for heritage organizations to see where they are with their digitization and digitalization strategy, where digitalization is then used to describe a more encompassing workflow that covers all activities of the heritage institutions. We are now in Indices developing that self-assessment tool. There are many examples also in the UK of this kind of tools, but most focus on the digitization aspect. What we want to do is to have one part on digitization, setting up a digital workflow, the infrastructure, the standards to connect to, etc. But in a second part, we want to focus on the more co-creative user engagement aspects, the participation aspects, and that is where we will focus on, because given the COVID-19 situation now, there are a lot of efforts already going on the digital field as such. So we think it is important to stress that you need to look at it from two sides, not only starting from the collections and then in the end thinking about publishing them, but more and more starting also from the user communities. And David showed quite some interesting examples on how to do this and how we did this with Photoconsortium and sometimes in collaboration with Europeana, where we focus on engaging citizens in contributing to collections, not only by offering their private collections for digitization. There are very good examples of user-donated collections, certainly of these negatives of the end of the first part of the 20th century, but also in co-curation and even more and more co-selection. So the users are coming inside of the institutions, and I always try to display this with these two graphs where you have the classic digital strategy that is conceived inside out, where you start with your collections and then you think about your digital workflow. You try to retrain your staff, you try to get the right competencies, and then you think, oh, now I have digitized all these collections, and you try to manage those, you try to do to clear the copyrights, etc., to make sure that you can manage them as assets. And more now institutions that were part of the first generation of digitization are now struggling with the technological lifecycle management and the sustainability of all this. In Flanders, there are several institutions that have to redo their digitization given the advances in technology. And of course, you need to think then how these collections contribute to your mostly non-profit, but also in some cases in for-profit business models. If you then look at the side from the users, the outside in, you have a more participatory model where you try to find digital technologies to engage users to help co-create in your workflow. You try to empower communities to participate in annotations, in curation, in selection, etc. And this then requires that you manage this community online. And as people from the Africa Museum in Belgium, the famous Tervuren Africa Museum, which is of course now a controversial museum given its colonial history, they say, well, Fred, the whole world is at our doorstep. And through the digital, communities from everywhere want a say in how we handle colonial heritage and how we handle these collections on colonial Africa. So it's no longer speaking to your neighbors and to your schools and visitors. It's negotiating with the whole world who through the internet tries to have their say on your collections. And that's a new challenge, but also a new opportunity. We are engaged. The Kaleidoscope project has been mentioned by David and also Erik. And here you see what we do. We make exhibitions, both physical and here in the Museum for Photography in Berlin, but also online, of course, on Europeana. We had these user engagement experiments with We Are Europe for Culture. For example, here, Arno Compagno di Vita, where people from the neighborhoods around Pisa contributed interesting collections of images to Photoconsortium and to Europeana by this way. Currently, we are working on Chinese collections with the Pagode project, also trying to safeguard and valuable negatives and dia photography and film reels, etc. And last project that I wanted to mention is Europeana 20th Century, where we, of course, do all these curational activities again. And again, in that context, KU Leuven digitized glass plates. And as you see, we digitize the glass plate and the metadata, the original metadata of these collections. I have to leave it here, so I give the floor back to Antonella. And I thank you for this enjoying this short presentation. I will try to stop sharing. Can I stop share here? Okay. So.
Thank you very much, Fred. We know that your time is very valuable, and we are glad to have had the opportunity to hear your presentation. And should any of the participants in the workshop have questions to Fred, it will be enough to send your question to us, and we will forward it to Fred, and we will come back with an answer via email. Well, I think that we have arrived to the end of this of the program of today. We thank you very much for having listened to us. I see that there were questions on the Q&A area that have been answered by my colleagues while we were progressing with the program of today. I remind you that the Photoconsortium is an association, so everybody who is interested in photographic heritage, valuing, preserving, making it accessible, sharing online, you are welcome to consider participation in Photoconsortium. It is open both to individuals and organizations. We are currently more than 30 members from all over Europe, and we regularly participate in European projects in the frame of Europeana and in other European frameworks. I would leave the floor to the audience for any further question you should have, if any. And if not, you know the website of a Photoconsortium that is in this last slide. We have an email, info@photoconsortium.net. We would be very happy to get back to you with comments, information, contacts in our community. We thank again the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales for the excellent opportunity you offered us. We invite you to consider your participation in the workshop tomorrow about 3D. That will be a workshop led by another member, I'm glad to say, another member of Photoconsortium. And in particular, I hope that we will meet again all together for the plenary session of the Digital Past conference on Wednesday. So thank you very much and see you soon online.
Yeah, thank you. Diolch yn fawr, Antonella, and thank you to all the panelists. Diolch yn fawr iawn i'r panelwyr i gyd am y gweithdy gwych yma. Gobeithio bod pawb wedi mwynhau ac wedi elwa o'r sesiwn. Os hoffech chi wylio eto, mi fydd recordiad o'r cyflwyniadau ar gael ar sianel YouTube y Comisiwn o fewn yr wythnosau nesaf. Fori mae gweithdy arall gyda ni, pa mor gymleth yw digido 3D mewn treftadaeth diwylliannol, wedi arwain gan Marinos Ioannidis o Brifysgol Technoleg Cyprus a Phenneth Treftadaeth Digidol UNESCO. Mae hwnna'n dechrau am 2 o'r gloch amser Prydain i'r rheini sydd wedi cofrestru am hwnna. Ac wrth gwrs mae'n cynhadledd ni ddydd Mercher sydd yn dechrau am 8:45. Again, just thank you very much to Antonella and all the panelists for a fabulous workshop. I hope you've all enjoyed. I found it very rewarding. If you're, should you want to view these presentations again, the recording of the presentations should be available on the Royal Commission's YouTube channel within the next couple of weeks. So as Antonella hinted at earlier, tomorrow we have another workshop that's titled How Complex is 3D Digitization in Cultural Heritage? And that's run by Marinos Ioannidis of Cyprus University of Technology and UNESCO Chair of Digital Heritage. And that starts at 2 o'clock London time, GMT, for those who are registered for that. And of course, on Wednesday is the Royal Commission's conference, and that starts at 9:15. Okay, so again, thank you very much. Diolch i gyd, diolch i chi gyd am ymuno, and hope you've enjoyed. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. We'll be in touch. Bye. Bye-bye.